Applicants, please keep your cameras off. Okay, Mr. Chair, we are live.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Ajax Committee of Adjustments meetings for Wednesday, October 26, 2022. This meeting of the Committee of Adjustments is being held electronically and live streamed on the internet pursuant to the Committee of Adjustment terms of reference and meeting procedures. All regular practices and procedures of the committee will continue to apply during this electronic meeting. If we encounter any technical difficulties, touch wood, we may take a brief recess while they are resolved. Thank you for your patience, and we'll now proceed with the meeting. Before moving on to the application portion of the meeting, I would like to confirm from my committee members if there's any disclosure of interest from the members of committee in pursuant to any of the 5 applications on the agenda today.
I have none.
Okay, seeing none, we shall proceed. The next item of business will be to adopt the minutes of our previous meeting that was held on September 28th, 2022. Can I get a motion from anybody on the committee? See, I see Mark. Can I get a seconder? Cecil, thank you. And is there any discussion on that motion of adoption of minutes?
I have none.
Okay, seeing none, then I'll call for a quick vote. If you're in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, motion has been carried 3-0 to accept and adopt the meeting minutes from the meeting held previously. The mandate of the Committee of Adjustments is that the committee is bound by the Planning Act to assess each application as submitted based on its ability to meet the 4 tests: that the application is minor in nature, it's desirable for the appropriate development or the use of the lands, and finally, it's in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan and the zoning bylaw. The process for tonight's meeting will be conducted in the following manner. The applicant or agent will be called upon. At their option, they will be able to provide a brief description of the minor variance that they're seeking and that they've applied for. The committee members may ask questions of the applicant and or the agent, after which anyone with a direct interest in the application will be given the opportunity to speak either for or against the application. Once a motion is put forward by a committee member, there will be no more discussion or input from the applicant or anyone having interest in the application. After a decision is made, a notice will be sent out and there will be a 20-day appeal period. Anyone having interest in the application may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal within 20 days of the decision of the committee. After those 20 days, the decision will become final and binding. If a building permit or other approvals are required, they may be filed during that appeal period. However, no building permits will be issued until after the appeal period is over and the decision then becomes final and binding. A respectful decorum during this evening's proceedings is expected of all present at the time. I'd like to now take this opportunity to introduce the committee members and the staff that will be handling and administrating the meeting today. My name is Wasif Ahmed. I'm the acting chair of the Committee of Adjustments for tonight's meeting. I've also have with me my fellow committee members, Mark Pavlik and Cecil Ramnot, along with the Town of Ajax staff. And today on hand, we have 2 folks from the Town of Ajax. We have Eric Simpson, who's the Secretary Treasurer and Senior Planner with the Town of Ajax, along with Jason McWilliam, who's the Deputy Clerk with the Town of Ajax. So we can now get into the application portion of the meeting. And what you'll see on the screen, if you are looking at the Zoom screen right now, you'll notice that there's 5 applications on the agenda, A, B, C, D, and E. Right before the meeting has started, the committee is going to amend the order of the agenda, and we'll cover item C as the last item on today's meeting agenda. So let's proceed with application. The first application, A4822, 31 Hickman Road, submitted by Wayne Henry And this is for the the bylaw requirement is for 4.2.21.1, minimum setback for access. A bylaw requirement lists a minimum setback of 1 meter is required between any wall or building of a building or structure containing a door or any lot line. The relief that's being requested is to permit a minimum setback of 0.8 meters between a door and the south interior side lot line. Rather. Eric, can you please confirm if a notice was served for this application and whether any responses were received?
Notice was served and no responses were received.
Okay. And do we have the applicant or an agent present for this application?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'm Ashley on behalf of my parents, Wayne and Trisha Henry.
Okay. Good evening, Ashley.
Hello,
So-
everybody.
Hello. So, Ashley, are you aware that the staff from the town of Ajax has written a report that you see on the screen, if you're looking at that right now, recommending approval
Yeah.
of this application? Perfect.
Yes, I'm well aware.
Awesome. And then are you also aware of the fact that there are four conditions, again, they're listed on the screen right now, that the subject variants apply only to the property municipally known as 31 Hickman and illustrated in the figures contained here in the report, or this decision shall become null and void. Number 2, that an unobstructed pedestrian path of travel to and from the side door be maintained at all times on the subject property, or this decision shall become null and void. Number 3, that the owner applicant maintain the existing drainage on the property, or this decision shall become null and void. And number 4, that the owner and applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town of Ajax Building Services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Are you in a thorough understanding of these conditions, and do you agree to them?
Yes, I understand and I agree.
Okay, amazing. Would you have anything else that you would like to brief the committee on in terms of the nature and the background of the application itself?
Essentially, when we purchased the home, I guess my parents rather, we were told that the lot beside our house would not be used for anything. It's a pretty wide property space that there is. I guess it's owned by the town. Wide open space, and we were aware that nothing was being built there. So, we didn't really, we weren't aware that this 1 meter, I guess, requirement was being put in place essentially, given the nature that there's no other, I guess, residential homes going to be beside us or commercial in that sense.
Okay. All right. Can I also, actually, sorry, I just wanted to make sure, your last name, just for the purposes of the minutes as well?
Henry as well.
It is Henry. Okay, perfect. Sorry,
Yes.
I wasn't sure whether I missed that earlier. All right, so thank you for that briefing. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant or staff in regards to this application, A4BA22?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just can I ask us to go on a quick recess? Apparently the link to our live stream isn't on the website right now, so I'm just gonna have IT staff set that up. So I'm just gonna ask that we go on a quick recess and then we'll reconvene very quickly.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Let's heed that advice, and we'll take a quick, Eric, would you say a 5 or 10 minute?
5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm assuming you'll leave the stream open, and I'll just ask everybody else to go on mute.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so guys, let's do that. So we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes. Thanks. And by started, I mean we just pick up where we left off, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Sorry about that, Ms. Henry. I apologize for that interruption to your application. I believe we were at the comment stage after your briefing, so I'll look to my fellow committee members to see if there's any questions about the application or the briefing provided by the applicant's agent.
I have a question.
Okay. Sorry, my video was a little glitchy there. I apologize, Cecil. I didn't see if your hand was up there. But please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I thought I heard the applicant saying that she was okay with all four conditions, all four other staff conditions. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and especially with condition number 2, where it talks about an unobstructed entry. Are there any issues with that particular condition?
Not that I can foresee. It should be able to be maintained with the unobstructed pedestrian path. I don't really see that being an issue.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody else? Or okay. I had a quick question, Ms. Henry, as well. Just wanted to also recognize the fact that in the staff report, there is a mention that this particular address would not qualify for an a legal accessory apartment. Just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that as well.
Yes, that's correct. We're only finishing the basement up to our standards, essentially, not making it into an apartment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Henry. And at this point in time, I'm just going to look to see if there's anybody here to speak for or against the application. Okay, seeing none and hearing none, I'd like to look to my committee to see if there's anybody willing to put a motion. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve application A48/22 as is minor in nature and meets the 4 tests.
Okay, motion heard. Is there a seconder?
I move to second the motion.
Thank you, Cecil.
Subject to all conditions as stipulated by staff.
Okay, perfect. And is there any discussion on the motion amongst the committee?
No.
Seeing and hearing none, I'd like to put this to a vote. All those in favor of the application A4822, please raise your hands. Okay, that's all three in favor. Thank you. The motion has been carried. And again, it will be subject to the 20-day appeal period. Thank you, Ms. Henry, for your application and your presence.
Thank you all very much, committee and other community members, for attending.
All right, and you're now free to go if you don't want the rest of the meeting to be your entertainment for the evening. So completely your call.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that we're actually on a cruise, but we've actually been able to tune in, so I'm grateful for that. But yes, I hope that everything else goes well for the rest of the meeting.
Well, and bon voyage. Good stuff. Thank you, Ms. Henry. All right, then we'll proceed to our next application for the evening, which is A4922. And this is for, as submitted by Rapar Mahmood, for municipally known civic address of 113 Chatfield Drive. The bylaw requirement is for section 4.2 is on encroachment into required yards where uncovered steps leading to or from a principal building or platform are not permitted within a required interior side yard. And section 2.2, which is zone standards for minimum setback from an interior side lot line of 1.2 meters. The relief being requested is to permit uncovered steps leading to a below grade entrance within the east interior side yard with a minimum setback of 0.3 meters from the interior sod lot line. Eric, can you confirm if notice was served for this application and whether there were any responses?
Notice was served and staff were contacted by the neighbor that just had some questions, but no formal comments were provided.
Okay, thank you for that acknowledgement. Do I have either the applicant or an agent to speak for this application?
Yes, my name is Rapper Mahmoud. I'm the applicant of A4922.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Mahmoud. So I wanted to just make sure that, are you aware that the committee has written a staff report? The staff has written a report recommending the approval for this application A4922. And again, if you're looking at your Zoom screen, it is being shared on the screen at the moment.
Yes, I received it and I am aware about it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So then you should also be aware that there are 4 conditions with that approval recommendation. They are, as they appear on the screen, I'll read it out for anybody that requires it, that the subject variance in front of us apply only to the property municipally known as 113 Chatfield Drive, and as illustrated in the figures contained here in the report, or this decision shall become null and void, that an unobstructed pedestrian path of travel to and from the uncovered steps be maintained at all times on the subject property, or this decision shall become null and void. Number 3, that the owner applicant maintain the existing drainage on the property, or this decision shall become null and void. And lastly, number 4, that the owner and applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Mr. Mahmoud, can you just again acknowledge that you're familiar and in agreement with these conditions?
Yes, I am in agreement, and yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And I'll give you the floor now to maybe give the committee members and myself any background on this application.
Which is everything's clear, and I don't have anything to add it for you. If you have a question, I'm ready to answer you.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. Can I get my committee, put the floor to my committee members first and see if there's any questions in regards to the application as presented in front of us? Mark?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. So Eric, there was a comment around town receiving a complaint in May 2022. Is that complaint specific to construction being conducted without a building permit, or was it a complaint was related to the concerns around the entrance itself, or any issue with the entrance other than there was no building permit at the time?
Through you, Mr. Chair. From the information that I have present, it was just more so around construction without a building permit rather than specifically an issue with what was constructed there.
Okay, thank you. No other questions for me, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. Any other questions from anybody else on the committee?
No, it seems, Mr. Chair, it seems pretty straightforward to me. I'm glad we got that first question clarified. Other than that, I do not have any questions.
Okay, great. So at this point, then I will look to see if there is anybody in attendance that's here to either speak, either for or against this particular application. And again, for some of you, your video may be off, so you may have to speak just via audio. Okay, seeing none, can I then look for a motion from my committee members on this application A4922? Cecil?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve minor variance application A4922 for 113 Chatfield Drive, subject to all staff conditions as it is minor in nature, desirable and appropriate for the intended use of and development of the lands, and it's in keeping with the general intent of the bylaws and the official plan. I move to approve.
Okay, just a small just point of clarification. Maybe it was my hearing, but I think I heard you say 115 Chatfield, but I think this is for 113 Chatfield.
Yes, 113 Chatfield.
Just okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you, Cecil, for that motion. Is there anybody here, can I get a seconder on that? Okay, Mark. Perfect. Any discussions or comments on the application from the committee members? Okay, hearing none, then I'll put this to a motion, to a vote rather, on the motion as put forth. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, motion is carried 3-0. Thank you, Mr. Mahmood, for your application. Again, this application will be subject to the 20-day appeal period before it is binding in nature.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the community. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. Have yourself a good evening. All right, moving along. And again, if you weren't here right at the beginning, we are moving item number 3C from the agenda to the end. So we'll now proceed with item number D, which is application A5122. And this is submitted by Manfred Schlender for the property municipally known as 52 Moynihan Crescent. And the bylaw requirement that is for platforms more than 1.2 meters in height above finished ground level, that the maximum area can only be 30 square meters. The relief that's being requested is for a platform that is greater than 1.2 meters in height and to permit a maximum area of 40.5 square meters. Is the applicant here in attendance or agent?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Good evening to you both. Can I just, for the purposes of the minutes, just get both your names, please?
Kathy Schlender. It's Kathy with a C.
Okay. Good evening, Kathy.
Hello.
And Manfred Schlender.
Okay. And good evening to you, sir. All right. So, Mr. and Mrs. Schlender, I have a report in front of us, as you may see on the screen, that the town of Ajax staff has put forth a recommendation to the committee that we approve this application as it's been submitted on the basis of following 3 conditions: that the subject variants apply only to the property municipally known as 52 Moynihan Crescent and as generally illustrated on the drawing submitted with this application, or this decision shall become null and void; that the owner applicant maintain the existing drainage on the property, or this decision shall become null and void; and that the owner applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services, or this decision shall become null and void. Have you been in receipt of this report?
Yes, we received it and we agree with the recommendations made.
Okay, amazing. And before I hand over the floor to you to perhaps give us some background, Eric, can I just confirm whether notice was served on this application and whether any responses received?
Notice was served and no correspondence was received.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. and Mrs. Schlender. I'll hand over the floor to you to perhaps give myself and the committee members a quick briefing on why we're here and what are you looking for.
So what we're doing is we're replacing an existing deck that was 12 feet out from the house, but not the full length of the house. We had stairs going down to the ground from the deck. What we've decided to do, that we had to tear down that deck because there was some problems with some of the footings. So the builder suggested we had to tear it down and put a new deck up. So what we decided to do was to eliminate the stairs because it was really just being used by the raccoons, not for good purposes. And we decided to go without the stairs, but go for the full length of the back of the house. So it's only an extra about 8 feet that from what we already had. And this way it's more aesthetic for the house. It looks much nicer because it's the full length of the house, not past, it's just the full length. Now the backyard, we have no houses behind us. There's a walking path to the lake behind our house. The one neighbor is going to be identical to what we had before, just different materials. The other neighbor we're still approximately more than 10 meters away from that house. We have an oversized lot because we have a pie-shaped lot.
Mm-hmm.
So we're close to the one neighbor, not close to the neighbor really, because it's wider than most houses on the street, just closer to the back fence. And it's just for a little distance, we're a little bit closer to the back fence, but most of the deck is not. It's further apart, like as the property widens. So we're not really affecting anybody and there's nobody in behind us.
And it's a farm past the
Past the walking path, there's a farm there.
Okay. Well, thank you for that briefing. I'll look to my committee members to see if there's any questions in regards to either the report or the presentation made by by Kathy or Manfred. Cecil?
Thank you, Mr. the Chair. First of all, before I ask my question to staff, I'd like to commend the applicant for the way he described the change that is being proposed in this minor variance. That was well done, and I understood clearly what he was doing. So thank you very much. My question to staff through the chair is as to whether this size of platform is kind of common to this area, or is it a one-off? Is this sort of approval something that can be considered common that has already been granted for this area?
Through the chair. So from my experience, I can't speak to this area specifically, but across the town, this is a very common variance. And as the owner has indicated, the deck is not going beyond the footprint of the house, like at the sides of the house. So just want to point that out.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you, Cecil. Anybody else on the committee that may have any questions? Okay, seeing none, I will then open it up to the public at large. Does anybody in attendance have anything to say in regards to either for or against this application? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I will then put this to my committee to see if they'd be willing to put forth a motion. Mark?
Through Mr. Chair, I move to approve application A5122, subject to the conditions set forth by staff, seeing that it is minor in nature and meets the other tests.
Okay, great. Can I get a seconder on that? Cecil, thank you. Any discussion on the motion from the committee?
I have none.
Okay, then I'd like to look for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented for A5122, please raise your hand. Okay, motion's been carried, 3-0. So your application, Mr. Schlender, has been approved at this evening's Committee of Adjustments meeting. However, it will be, like I mentioned earlier at the top of the call, it will be subject to the 20-day appeal period.
Okay. Thank
Can
you.
I ask a quick question? So do we have to resubmit the papers after 23 days, or can we ask them to proceed now and then they wait the 23 days?
Yeah, I'll let town staff handle that more concretely. I know I can tell you. Yeah, what I can tell you is that you can apply for your building permit, but none can be granted to you until the 20-day appeal period is finished.
Thanks.
Eric, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, that's correct. There's nothing required on your end. We'll notify you if there's been no appeals after the 20 days. But yeah, the permit can be processed, can be reviewed. It just can't be issued until the final and binding.
Great, thank you.
All right. Have yourselves a good evening, Mr. Schlender.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Of course, take
Bye,
care.
gentlemen.
Okay, so moving along, I've got next on the docket for the committee tonight is the fourth application, A5222. This is submitted by Varasa Design Associates on behalf of Gary Shankar and Sivashankar Senathambi for the property of 41 Keith Wright Crescent. Do I have an applicant or an agent representing the application here tonight?
Yes, this is Ken Barata. I'm here.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, Mr. Brata. So the bylaw requirement that the application is seeking, sorry, if you're not speaking, if you could just go on mute for me, please. The bylaw requirement on this application is encroachment into required yards, uncovered steps leading to or from a principal building or platform are not permitted within a required interior side yard. Section 6.2.2 for zone standards, a minimum setback from an interior solid line of 0.3 meters on one side and 1.2 meters on the other for detached dwellings with a minimum aggregate setback between dwellings of 1.2 meters. The relief that's being requested is to permit uncovered steps leading to a below-grade entrance within the west interior side yard with a minimum setback of 0.1 meters from the interior side lot line, and to permit a minimum aggregate setback between uncovered steps and an adjacent dwelling of 0.7 meters. Eric, can you confirm whether notice was served and whether any responses beyond, I think, the one that you have forwarded to the committee?
Yep, notice was served, and there's just the one piece of correspondence in favor of the application, which was provided.
Okay, amazing, thank you. So, Mr. Ratha, if I can come back to you, are you, what you may see on the screen in front of you is a Town of Ajax report recommending approval to the committee this evening for this application on the condition that there's 4 conditions, as a matter of fact, that the subject variances apply only to the property municipally known as 41 Keith Wright Crescent, and as illustrated in the figures contained herein, or this decision shall become null and void. Number 2, that an unobstructed pedestrian path of travel to and from the uncovered steps be maintained at all times on the subject property, or this decision shall become null and void. Number 3, that the owner applicant maintain the existing drainage on the property, or this decision shall become null and void. And lastly, that the owner applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the Town of Ajax Building Services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Are you in receipt of this report, and do you agree and understand the conditions here? You may be on mute, Mr. Ratha. We can't hear you, Mr. Ratha. If you're speaking, you're gonna have to take yourself off mute.
Oh, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah, I got the report from the staff and I read it. Everything is understood. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. I'm going to give you a few minutes here to maybe, if you want to give some background to the committee about the change that's happening at this address, and why you think the committee should approve it.
This particular permit was applied, and we got the permit in 2020. And what happened is the contractor, when he was doing, actually it's supposed to be online with the door, supposed to be on the same level as the grade, only 6 inch. But when they were doing the construction, they made a mistake and put it like a 2-step down. So that's what we went through. This is a deferral, or, like earlier, we had this committee of adjustments and we have to do it again because the structural detail which we provided when they were issuing the building permit, they said we need a retaining wall of, that's the reason we are coming back to you.
Okay. All right, so let me thank you for that briefing, Mr. Ratha. I'll open it up to my fellow committee members to see if there's any questions or comments. I think I see Mark.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, to stop. Eric, similar to my question on the previous file, it says this application came due to as a result of a complaint. Was the complaint in regard to the way the door was being constructed, or is it had to do with not having a proper building permit, or is there anything we should be concerned with as related to the complaint?
Through the chair, from the knowledge that staff have, it's similar to the other situation where it was just a complaint based on construction without a permit.
Understood. Okay, thank you for that.
Cecil?
So thank you, Chair, through the chair. Question to staff. I'm not sure whether I'm seeing the change correctly on the drawing, but is there a gas meter along the route to the entrance? And would that, if that is the case, is that going to be an issue?
Through the chair, I'm just going to go to that figure in the report. Just 1 second. So no, staff do note in the report that because of how close it is to the front, it's not an issue. If the gas meter was, say, a lot closer to where the actual steps went down or went back up, then it would be an issue that they'd have to look into, but we don't have any issues with where it's located.
Okay. So there was no follow-up during the permitting process then? This is all decided right now and that's the way it's going to be left, correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Okay. Do I have any other questions from committee members? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone in attendance here on audio or video that's here to speak either for or against this particular application A5222 for 41 Keith Wright Crescent? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I will then look to a motion on the application from the committee. Cecil?
Through the chair, I move to approve minor variance application A5222 for 41 Keith White Crescent, subject to all staff conditions as it is minor in nature and meets the 4 tests. I move to approve.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that motion? Mark? Thank you. All right. Any discussion amongst the committee members on the motion itself?
No.
Seeing none, I'd like to then put the motion to a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that's 3-0. And motion carried. All in favor. Thank you, Mr. Ratha, for your information, and thank you for joining us this evening. As you may have heard at the beginning of the call, the application has been approved here, and it is now subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report and the 20-day appeal period.
Thank you so much.
All right, you have yourself a good evening.
You too.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. Sorry, we'll just give it a minute to exit. Okay. All right, so we are at the last application for the evening, and this is for minor variance A5022 as submitted by Quality Brand Building Corporation on behalf of 80 Bailey Street West for the property municipally known as 72 and 80 Bailey Street West. And the application is seeking like 3 different bylaw requirements and relief from them. One in regards to the section 5.10.1 residential parking requirements in regards to the minimum amount of parking spaces for an apartment dwelling. Section 5.10.2 parking requirements for non-residential uses, and bylaw requirement section 6.9.2 for zone standards in regards to setbacks from interior solid lot lines for non-residential and residential buildings, and from rear lot line for non-residential and residential mixed-use buildings. Is the applicant here or agent representing the application?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kevin Bouchard. I'm a planning consultant with IPS, Innovative Planning Solutions, at 647 Welland Road in Barrie. I'm representing QBBC as well. Mr. Mohammed Ashuri, who is a project manager and architect for QBBC, is also in attendance on the call and available to the committee to respond to questions.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Bouchard, and to your fellow colleagues. Before I continue with the application, Eric, can you confirm whether notice was served on this application to the community and whether there was any responses received?
Yes, notice was served. We did receive just some general questions from the public, but no formal comments were received.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So Mr. Bouchard, you may, and team, you may see a staff report on the screen, on your Zoom screen, that does, from the town staff, that does recommend approval from the committee for this application A5022, based on 3 different conditions. That the subject variances apply only to the lands municipally known as 72 and 80 Bailey Street West, and the development of such lands in accordance with approved and only approved site plan application SP 1120, or this decision rather shall become null and void That number two, that the owner applicant obtain approval of the site plan application SP 1120 and enter into a site plan agreement with the town to the satisfaction of the town, which secures for the implementation of transportation demand management measures as recommended in the parking justification study dated September 2022, prepared by CF Crozier and Associates Inc. to the satisfaction of the town, or this decision shall become null and void. And number three, that the owner applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town's building services section, or this decision shall become null and void. Are you, can you acknowledge receipt of this staff report, and are you in alignment with the conditions as outlined?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I can confirm that I have received and QBBC has received the staff report, and that we are in agreement with the conditions that are being, the three conditions that have been detailed by staff in their report.
Okay, wonderful. So then, Mr. Michaud, I'll give you the floor here to perhaps give the committee some background on the application itself, why it's being brought forth for, and why you're seeking the minor variances here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to break my presentation into two parts. One is the first part, providing a bit of a background to what is the property and what is being proposed, and how it's being proposed. And the second is in speaking to the particular recommendations that are provided. So in that sense, the property is known as you've already indicated, 72 and 80 Bailey Street West. It's on the north side of Bailey Street and the west side of Commercial Avenue in Ajax. It has a total area of approximately 0.86 hectares and about 50 meters frontage along Bailey Street and 175 meters frontage along Commercial Avenue. The access to the property is in its developed form will be from Commercial Avenue. The property currently contains a fast food restaurant, a Wendy's, which is accessed from Bailey Street. In the surrounding area, the property is bounded on the north and west by 3.5 story townhouses, and uses to the east include commercial, and then in the proximity include higher density residential uses as well. In terms of the town's official plan, it designates this property as downtown regional center, and it's considered a mixed-use residential area. The downtown regional center, as staff have pointed out in the report, is intended to provide for redevelopment of the area in terms of intensive mixed-use, transit-oriented development. So this application, in that sense, represents where the town intends to go in terms of the development of lands in this area. And it's much higher density than obviously the existing development that has happened. It also designates the property as downtown residential, and that permits a range of residential uses, mixed-use buildings, etc. The maximum height for buildings in this designation is 25 stories, and there is no real maximum densities. So that's the official plan. It really is speaking toward redevelopment in this area. The companion zoning bylaw 95/2003 designates the property, zones the property as downtown central area mixed use DCA/MU, and it permits apartment dwellings and a broad range of commercial uses. So in substance, what's happening here is that this application reflects the intent of the municipality, both in terms of its official plan and its zoning bylaw. And of course, that, as we all know, would satisfy the first two tests, if you will, of the four tests. In terms of the description of the application, as I mentioned, it is at the intersection of Bailey Street and Commercial Avenue. The property, and if I could ask you to go to, I think, figure 1, it gives you an illustration of an L-shaped building fronting onto Bailey Street and Commercial Avenue. I think it's page 7. That's exactly it. And this will be useful perhaps in showing the relationship to the townhome development in the area. So on the north end of the site, and so that's toward Stonewood Street, we have a podium that is up to 8 stories, and then we have 2 separate towers. There we go, and that'll show you that illustration. Have 2 separate towers, one of 18 stories and a second of 23 stories. A total of 550 residential units are being proposed, and a total of 820, just over 820 square meters of commercial areas proposed along commercial street primarily. Excuse me. And this is all consistent, as I said, with the official plan and zoning designation. So as I said a little bit earlier as well, the proposed development has access off of commercial street. A total of 663 parking spaces are provided to support the development, including 20 spaces for commercial use. So the second part here, I'd like to talk just about the minimum parking rate and the variances that the variances that are being dealt with. And particularly the first one, and I'm going back to recommendation 1 of the committee from the staff report. It identifies a minimum parking rate for apartment dwelling at 1 space per unit, and for visitor parking at 0.15 spaces per unit. And these, what we're trying to do is, as I said a little bit earlier, is provide transit-supported, transit-oriented development. And part of that is inviting a more reduced parking standard. This discussion has gone on with the city transportation engineering, the town's transportation engineering manager. And we have provided information to support this request through site-specific studies, through surrogate sites, which bear out this relationship of 1 space per unit for the residences and 0.15. So not only are we satisfied, our traffic engineer is satisfied, but also the town's transportation manager is satisfied that this is an appropriate ratio for parking. The second parking variance is more nominal than anything else. It proposes 3.55 spaces per 100 meters of gross floor area. The current for commercial space, the current standard in the zoning bylaw is 1 space per 28 square meters. So this is just really a restating of this standard on a per 100 meter basis. It's not more or well, it is very marginally less, I think 2 100ths, but it doesn't represent a significant change in terms of commercial. So those are the parking standards that we're asking for variance. The 2 other variances relate to setbacks of the building, and I'm going to go to the bottom of your screen, and on the westerly side, if you can point that out, you'll see the most southerly tower, the higher tower. It has a setback of approximately 7.5 meters. It will have a setback of 7.5 meters to the westerly property line. That is consistent with and in compliance with the current zoning bylaw. So there's no variance there. However, there is a variance being considered for the location of the underground parking to within 1 meter of the property line. And obviously that variance will not have an impact on use or shadowing relating to the adjacent townhome properties. So we don't believe that there is a real or tangible effect beyond obviously the construction in having that variance. So we're asking for, we consider that to be minor and reasonable in terms of its request. Similarly, on the rear property line, we're asking for a variance to allow the underground parking garage to within 1 meter of the rear property line. Essentially under the same kind of conditions. We are, however, asking for a minimum setback for the rear lot line of 9 meters. That's correct in the area that you're pointing it out. And on page 7, table 3, there is a discussion of the application of the zoning bylaw in terms of required setbacks. And essentially, the way the bylaw is applied, and it's a bit of a curious application, is that it requires up to a 15-meter setback based on building height. And we're asking for a 9-meter setback. And the building height is relating to the height of the towers. And I think the bylaw was written in the expectation that a tower would be located in close proximity to a property line. In this case, it's not. The closest tower to the property line is some 67 meters away. So there is really no practical effect in terms of the height of that building on the rear yard setback. Staff are supporting a reduction of the setback to 9 meters, which is reflected in the site plan for the podium on the west side of the building of 7 stories, is slightly more for the 8th story in that podium. I think if the bylaw were applied as written, it would be counterproductive to the town's intent from an urban design to a perspective to create height and density in this particular area. So staff, I think, have brought a reasonable position forward, recommending the reduction to the 9-meter width. So, Mr. Chair, this is our representation to you this evening, presentation to you. Of course, our view is that we satisfy the 4 tests in terms of meeting the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw, general purpose and intent of the official plan, that the variance is desirable in terms of an appropriate use of land, and that is for the high density residential, and that these variances in the context of this application are minor in nature. That's my presentation to the committee. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchard. So I'll open it up to my fellow committee members to see if there's any questions, comments. Cecil?
Thank you, through the chair. To the applicant, the agent. With this sort of intensification taking place, I know that that particular area could get very, very active in terms of parking can be an issue during Christmas time, or maybe some special events that are taking place, etc. And I have seen in the plaza there where, it's just filled with a lot of cars. And I was wondering what provisions are being made in the current development to ensure that parking spaces are what they're meant for, and that is for the residents, etc., and that there isn't sort of a, that people wanting to come over and park in an area where they shouldn't park. I was kind of wondering whether there was something like paid parking or anything like that that is being considered for the for this development. I kind of wonder whether you could give us, some clarity as to how parking is being proposed for this development.
Okay, so this is a concern. I'm having a little trouble with your audio, and it could be my ears, so I'm going to confess to that. But so let me explain sort of what happens then. So we've done not only just a parking study in sort of a general view in terms of an overview, but looking at specific sites and condominium developments and residential developments that have been developed in this area. So, Ajax, Whitby, and we've done parking surveys. So we look at the total usage and demand for parking within these facilities or these units, and this information has been presented to the transportation manager, and he's been accepting of the results of that, and they're detailed more clearly in the report, where you can see that instead of dealing with one space perhaps per unit, the actual utilization of parking for a residential unit was about 0.86. And so the expectation is similar in terms of visitor parking from 0.25 to 0.86. So what's happening in the industry is that parking is shifting, the demand for parking is shifting And part of that is supported by transportation demand measures like increased transit and car sharing, etc. And the expectation is that these standards will continue to decline. So as we come forward with a building that's going to be built for, I'm going to just say 100 years, we don't want to obviously overbuild parking because it's a cost that gets passed on to the residents living in the building, and it decreases the affordability of that unit because the cost of parking is something like $50,000 or $60,000 per unit. So we're really trying to right size the approach that we use for parking to the building itself. And the way that we do that is we use surveys of existing development. I expect, and the industry expects, that demand is going to go down. Ajax is obviously more suburban than downtown Toronto, but it isn't out, outside of that trend. It will move along, as will Barrie, as will Vaughan. So we're all trying to build the affordable housing. We're all trying to right size the parking to units, and that is going to be a moving target, and it's going to be a moving target, I think, going down. In terms of the commercial, there should be no demand on the basis of our assessment and the study that has been reviewed and agreed to by your transportation manager in Ajax. There should be no demand for parking from this development on the commercial property next door. And of course, the commercial property next door has its own sufficient parking requirement, and there wouldn't be access to the underground parking for that development to rely on the parking in this facility. So they're going to operate both independently and with sufficient parking to meet their own requirements. So I hope through the committee that I've sort of given you the background, and it's all reflected in the documentation and the discussion and staff's very thorough report. So I think we're really in a good place in terms of this assessment. It's been well thought out, and it's consistent with standards that are being observed elsewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that explanation really clarified it, and more than I thought that I would need, but it really gave me a very comprehensive background as to the parking requirements and as to how that is being attended to in the design of the development. I was kind of wondering, I have another question as to whether this particular project is just for rental accommodations, or is it a mix of rental and condominium? Could you comment on that?
Well, my understanding is that it is a condominium project, but those lines get blurred. And as you well know, that people buy condominiums for the future and they rent them out in the interim. And I don't have a number for you that, and I think it sort of prompts me to think, well, what is that number and what could it be? But it's certainly going to serve a number of markets. It's going to serve a retirement market. It's going to serve an entry-level market into housing, into Ajax. Some will be rentals, some will be ownership in the end. So it's a very blurred line in when we talk about that kind of thing in practical application.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you very much. And if I may, Mr. Chair, if I can ask a final question, as to the timeline of the project to the agent, could you give us some sense of what that might be?
Well, it's going as quickly as possible. That's not to say it's going as fast as we like. So that's the challenge. And I think where we are is we've been through a review process and site plan in a first round circulation. It's going to go into a second round, and that's where we're going to be finalizing the issues of phasing in the detail. But we do not require an official plan amendment. We do not require a zone change application, and there is no practical sense of an appeal for this site. So we think that we can be through the review process certainly by the end of next year and be getting into that construction timeframe within 2 to 3 years. So I would say that's sort of the early schedule. If things delayed, they would be delayed for other reasons outside of the approval process. But certainly our interest in getting this variance and this suite of variances is to move the application forward as quickly as we practically can.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Cecil. Mark, anything from you?
I have a question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. Eric, often we get in the application we get a number count, right? So that I get that there's rate variances are indicated, but often we'll see whatever X 500 is required under the bylaw, and the application is seeking relief to allow 400 spaces. Do we have I'm trying to do the math in my head and I wasn't keeping up a bit. So do we have that type of totals that you could provide?
Through the chair, yeah, those details weren't provided in the report just because this is a specific rate variance. I can quickly calculate it though for you. Just to confirm, Kevin, how many units are there again?
Well, there'll be 550 units.
550, okay.
And then there'll be commercial space of 800 and I think it is 26 square meters.
So just from a residential perspective, the bylaw requires 1.25 spaces per unit. So that'd be looking at 688 parking spaces, whereas with the proposed rate of one space, that's 550 spaces. So you're looking at 138 parking space reduction. From the visitor standpoint, it's only a 0.1 difference. It's usually 0.25. They're going for 0.15. So I didn't calculate those numbers, but that would be small. On the commercial front, it really depends on the different uses that are going into that, but there's limited space, and that's why we approached this with the blended parking rate. And the blended parking rate that they are proposing is in line with our general parking rate, which is the parking rate for various different commercial uses, and is a parking rate that's very common amongst other municipalities.
The only thing I would want to add through you, Mr. Chairman, is that this has all been worked through in a lot of detail with your transportation manager, and staff have endorsed this rate reduction on the basis of an experienced traffic manager in his view, and what has been observed in this community and surrounding communities. This is not a Toronto rate. This is an Eastern GTA rate.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And sir, could you, I know you just said it a minute ago, could you remind me what the number of units of residential there was again?
I'm sorry, 550.
And Eric, your calculation was 550 parking spaces, right?
If you're using the zoning bylaw requirement for residential spaces, it would be 688, whereas they're doing 550 because it's one space per unit.
One per unit. Okay, understood. Okay, that helps.
And then, of course, we would add the visitor component as well. So it's 1.15. The math is 1.15 times 550, which is 633. So we are not just providing 550 spaces. It's 1.15 for visitor and residential. So you'll get 633.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anything
Lots of numbers float around.
Anything else, Mark?
No, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll jump in with a couple of quick questions, Mr. Bouchard. So here was my concern when I read this report and I looked at this application. I hear you in the 550. I hear you on the fact that, hey, it's you're using an Eastern Toronto proxy in terms of parking spaces based on the study. The one thing that I found reminiscent in the report was the breakdown of 1 bedroom versus 2 bedroom versus 3 bedroom. What I did read in the report is that the 550 is a combination thereof. And not knowing how many 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, I just personally, I don't have a professional opinion on this, I'm just a regular civilian, but what I was struggling with personally was how can a 2 or 3 bedroom unit have 1 parking spot? And how does that work even in an area where the town, I completely get it, is looking for more high density buildings, more use of public transit, etc. And it's putting its money where it's mouth. You've got cycling lanes, you've got investment in Durham Region Transit and the like. Pardon me. But that was just thorn in my mind in terms of how would that work. So maybe I'll open it up for comments or questions from you.
Okay, it's I'm going to invite Mohammed to perhaps provide some additional comments, but I'm going to suggest to you this. It's sort of an apples and oranges discussion. The town, when it considers an appropriate parking standard, it doesn't break down the unit type by 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. And the proxies that we had, we provided that information to the town. And typically you're going to get obviously bachelor 1s and 2s, and maybe, well, almost certainly less than 10% of 3s. So you're going to have that weighting more to the standard. Now, some of the residents will have cars, some will not have cars, and some will rely on transit. And as we move forward, car sharing is going to be a bigger factor in how we go forward. So we know we're building for today already, what's being experienced on the ground today. And we know there's going to be a surplus in the future as residents will either not own cars or own fewer cars as they go forward, and rely more on transit. And that's going to be happening. The other issue that you tag in is for affordability. And this is when there are so many costs that are assigned to housing these days in terms of development costs, levies, and charges. This is one way of right-sizing the cost of units to a resident. So if they do not need a car, or only periodically need a car, or could deal with car share or Uber, they may be inclined to save the cost in terms of their unit, and that sort of frees up that capacity for someone else or for these other units. So it's a bit of a balancing. It's not an equation, and I've seen that many times in zoning bylaws. How many 2s, 1s, and 3s, and what is the parking at 1, 1.5, and this is a ratio exercise, and the ratio we've calculated is based on a generic spread of units, and that's where the town has chosen, how it's chosen to establish its standard. And that's as clear an example. I don't think you need to mix the two measurements together. I don't think it's reasonable to do that 1, 2, 3s and starting calculating a standard that's based on a generic mix. So if you understand where I'm going with that, I don't think it's necessary to start to look at unit sizes. And that's not the town's practice. I keep wanting to make Ajax a city, and I shouldn't do that. It's the town.
All right, no, fair enough. In terms of, I also did notice in the staff report, it did talk about there would be provisioning for bicycle storage facilities, both indoor and outdoor, etc. Give me a ratio on that in terms of how many storage facilities for bicycles versus if you had to even hazard a guess on approximately to the 5.
I know exactly, but I have to shuffle a couple of papers to do that. If you don't,
I don't mind.
That's Mohammed. You can show me up here, please do. Oh, so I'm telling you, I can tell you the number right now is that the total spaces provided are 594 spaces, and so these will be enclosed. They obviously won't be outside. So that is the parking component required, and I can't. There's short term, there's long term, but essentially every unit and maybe then some has parking, has bicycle parking provided.
And this is in addition to any storage lockers?
This is separate and unique.
This is separate,
yes.
right? Perfect. Okay. All right. And so that makes me feel a little bit better. Thank you. If the application doesn't get approved here this evening, what's your recourse?
That has unfortunately very serious implications for this application going forward. And the reason is that it's investor driven, and the investors in this case are highly sensitive to having an application that's fully compliant with municipal bylaws going forward. So there are different dynamics in every group, and unfortunately this would cause some very serious rethinking of this application because it's about investors joining in and them wanting to be assured that that this is fully achievable. And that's why they've come to the table, if you will, with meeting setback requirements for the buildings above grade particularly. This is a highly compliant application, and at least in my estimation, and I do applications all across the GTA. And but in this particular group, there's a very high degree of sensitivity in going forward with an application that has risks. So unfortunately, this could cause some serious peril in going forward.
It makes sense. I know the question was provocative, Mr. Bouchard, so I appreciate the
well, I hope I didn't get my dander up.
No. It was a very reasonable explanation. I get that. Last question. I'm not sure whether this is more for town staff, perhaps. And I think one of my colleagues actually raised it a little bit earlier. I'm gonna push on that a little bit, just based on where we are in time of year. With Christmas around the corner, there's always going to be a surge in demand of visitor parking, et cetera, with family visiting, this and that, what have you. Just kind of past Thanksgiving, heading into Christmas season, kind of makes me wonder, how does this facility handle that surge in demand? When we're looking at meeting minimums, we're not talking maximums on the code or in the bylaw, rather, we're talking about meeting minimums. And if we're stretching to meet minimums, how does this project and the residents and the visitors will deal with surge in say Christmas 2025 or 2026? How does that work? What do you kind of see there?
So this is the question whether we're talking about almost anything. It could be a church service, synagogue. It could be any. There's always going to be surge parking at different points in time, and so part of that is going to be using on-street parking, for example, on Commercial Road. So that would be available to do that. There may be commercial lots in the area or other public parking in the area, but essentially, I think the people who are arriving would have to look at how they're going to deal with their cars, and they're knowing that there wouldn't be parking on more than 30, let's say, parking spots. We would be able to give over in that situation the commercial parking spots over to the visitor on top of. So you have your visitor quotient, and then you would have commercial parking that would double, if you would. So there would be some additional surge there, and then you have street parking. So it would, if it's a 50-person party, that might be a challenge. But I think there's, in that quantum, you have the 550 units that goes to 663. So you have over 100 units of visitor. Then you probably have the commercial, so that makes another 130. So there is flex to accommodate that. But if it's Thanksgiving or Christmas, you could see an overflow, as you would in any street, in any neighborhood.
Absolutely. So appreciate the answer, Mr. Bouchard. Are you guys looking at the project, looking at perhaps forging any formal or informal agreements with commercial properties in and around, like you mentioned at the top of your presentation? I'm familiar with the area enough that I know there's other plazas that do have parking lots, and based on time of day, you probably, I think visitors may be able to use that.
I don't think they are not at this point in time. I don't think it's necessary at this point in time. I think there's enough flex to handle what we need to. I think on a daily basis, there may be overflow on a Christmas or Thanksgiving, but that, as I said, that's everywhere. And we just simply have to manage through that process.
Okay, so no plans. Got it. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Bouchard, and I appreciate, again, the candid responses. Look forward to see whether there's anybody here in attendance here to speak either for or against the this particular application, A5022.
Hi, good evening. My name is Tamika Mercurius. How are you?
Very well, Tamika. How are you this evening?
I'm well, thank you.
Tamika, can I just get your last name for the minutes, for the purpose of the minutes as well, please?
Sure, Mercurius.
Okay, perfect. And you wanted to speak for or against the application?
I'm trying to figure out which one. Really, just from all I heard today, just some considerations, right? I think to reiterate, there were some great points made around parking. I live on Stonewood Street, so, you know, despite surveys and, you know, pulse checks, we have an issue with parking today in the area. With residential parking, a lot of people have kind of outgrown these townhomes, and we're in 2, 3, and 4 car homes. That spills out onto that free side parking on commercial, and it's extremely limited. So I just think there would be a concern with having a whole parking space, both residential and commercial accommodations, where we're already dealing with ticketing regularly on our street and a lack of parking. So I do see that being problematic, and understanding we have to manage, but the question is how. We already have a challenge with parking. And then I had a question about building height in terms of, again, the townhomes that surround this proposed area. I don't think it's anybody's desire to look out their window and see, you know, a 25-tower building. So have there been considerations, excuse me, around directionally how these buildings will be positioned, and subsequently the entrance to the parking, because it's already a tight street with access to commercial, the plaza across the street, the plaza on the west side, and now here.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for being here at the meeting and raising those concerns. Let me redirect that second question to in terms of building height to town staff. Eric, can you comment on that?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Yes, the proposed building height does comply with the zoning bylaw as well as the official plan. The building has been sited or masked so that, you know, the tallest portions are furthest away from the adjacent lower density residential. That's why you have the self tower closest to the street and then the other tower closest to commercial. Like Mr. Bouchard's already gone through, the building is compliant with the minimum setbacks. It's the rear setback that isn't compliant. However, that's simply due to the fact that depending on how tall your building is, that is the minimum setback that requires to the whole building in general, despite the fact that where it's being measured in the situation of the rear is actually the smallest portion in terms of height of that building. The tallest portion of the building is further away from that. And in this chart, I can just go to it, give you kind of a breakdown. You'll see it's the first podium step back. So stories 2 to 5 of the building. The height there, where that 9-meter setback is proposed, it's only 11.5 meters, whereas, you know, the North Tower, the South Tower, over 60 square meters, and the setbacks over 60 to 140 square meters. So it's not as if where the 9-meter setback is, you have the tower. The towers are much closer to the main commercial and Bailey Street frontages.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And lastly, a question around security and cleanliness. You know, we have some challenges with that today running along commercial. So again, to the agent, if there's any considerations or proposed plans on how to manage security and cleanliness for not only the towers, but also the parking.
Okay. Mr. Bouchard or team, are you from the applicant side? Are you able to comment on that?
Well, yeah, I think I want to comment on a couple of things if I can, Mr. Chairman. Certainly on this is going to be a private condominium corporation, so they're going to maintain it as the property that it is and that they own. So there's going to be pride in ownership and management of this facility. So I don't think in any way that it's going to be derelict or mismanaged. I wanted to talk about the notion of cars and parking and in the townhouse development. The individual who's buying into this development, cannot adopt the perspective or carry forward the perspective that this is a suburban home and they can park 2 cars in the garage and 2 cars in the driveway. And to the extent that that may be happening next door, that's what's causing the problem, is that people's purchase something or a product that isn't suited to their lifestyle. And so there has to be an alignment, and there will be an alignment because of the parking arrangement that's being done. You don't have a driveway to store your car in, and you don't have a garage to store all your other stuff in. This is going to be a style that somebody moving into this building will be moving into a condominium, and it has a dedicated parking space, and maybe 2 if they're able to rent one from somebody else or purchase another one. But that said, it's not the same as a townhouse development or a single family suburban style development. And that's the point. That's what the city is looking for in this redevelopment, is for a compact, urban, transit-oriented lifestyle. If we say, well, we have to provide parking as if it was in a suburban area, then it misses the point. And of this progression. There are other places in the city to live, in the town to live, that would satisfy somebody's requirement for 4 cars. But this isn't going to be one of them. And those people won't be attracted to this development because it won't be oriented to that lifestyle.
Respectfully,
we have to get into that shift.
I think, circumstances and situations economically have created it where people are in a position where they have to take dwelling where they can, and those things will happen irregardless. Again, just a civilian, so not saying it's planning and zoning, but we have things like traffic and speed. There are lots of kids, there are pets, there are considerations for not just this dwelling, but the entire area, because it's already very tight and very close. So again, respectfully, I understand notionally that would be logical to think, but I think where we are now in the world, people are struggling. And if they can get into a condo dwelling and they have 2 cars, I don't think they're going to get rid of a car to get into it. But again, we have years to see, right? So we'll see how it goes. Thank you. Appreciate the committee's time.
Thank you for your input, Tamika. Really appreciate you coming out. All right. Is there anybody else here in attendance to either speak either for or against the application? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, then look to see if there's a motion from the committee members. If anybody would like to put forth a motion in regards to this application A5022. Cecil? You're on mute. You're on mute. No, still on mute, Cecil.
Oh yeah, I've been having some microphone problems here.
Yep.
So thank you very much for tolerating me there. So the chair, before I move to the motion part, I was kind of wondering whether the applicant or the town could give us a sense as to where public transit would be located relative, to the requirements of this new project. Is there going to be like a bus stop along Commercial Avenue or just on Bailey, or a combination of the 2?
Through the chair, yes, there is a bus line that goes along Bailey. Off the top of my head, I can't recall exactly where the bus stops are, but there is a bus stop at, I think, Commercial and Bailey, actually, right at the intersection. There's also bike lanes along Commercial, and there are plans in the future at the regional level to change what the right-of-way looks like along Bailey. I think they are looking at putting like designated bus lanes at some point in time in the future. So,
yeah, I think if I could, Mr. Chair, that they're moving towards a transitway, theme in this area, and part of the support for that is the increasing density. It won't happen unless we move forward with the full picture here.
Yes, so thank you very much for that answer, Ms. Bouchard. Is there a plan to have street parking along Commercial Avenue?
Through the chair, yeah, the street parking already exists along Commercial, and it is the intent that it will remain.
Okay. And there was a bike lane as well along Commercial Avenue?
Correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. So before I look for a motion, just to staff, the parking on Commercial Avenue, could you perhaps share whether that's a paid parking or on or pay and display, or not paid parking?
Mr. Chair, I do not believe it's paid parking. It's just designated parallel spaces along the right-of-way, but to my knowledge, it is not paid parking.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, just one final question here. Could you give us a sense as to how many cars can be parked along Commercial Avenue? What might we be thinking about currently, or maybe in the future when this project is built?
Through the chair, I would have to take some time to look at our mapping system. I don't know that number off the top of my head.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could, you know, my recollection, you're probably in the 20 range, not the 5 range. So it is multiple parking, that kind of thing. And one other thing I could add to just on Bailey Road is it's a regional road, and it's going to be undertaking a road widening as part of the transit and development initiatives. So there's a thoughtful plan in place for transit and in this area, and it's supporting these kinds of densities.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Hearing none, can I perhaps look for a motion on this application A5022 from committee?
Yes.
Cecil?
So, Mr. Chair, I move to approve minor various application A5022 for 7280 Bailey Street West, subject to all staff conditions, as it is minor in nature, desirable, and appropriate for the intended use and development of the lands, and it's in keeping with the general intent of the bylaws and the official plan. I move to approve.
Okay. Can I get a seconder on that? Mark? All right. Any other comments or discussion amongst the committee members for the motion? Okay. Seeing, hearing none. Look for a vote on the motion as presented. All those in favor? Okay. Motion is carried 3-0. And again, the application is subject to A5022, has been approved at the Committee of Adjustments meeting dated today, subject to the conditions as outlined in the staff report, as we mentioned earlier, and the 20-day appeal period. Thank you to all the presenters. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, committee member and staff. Highly appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening.
You as well.
And thank you very much, Ms. Tamika, as well, for joining and providing feedback for us as well. It's very valuable.
Very true. Thank you, gentlemen, and enjoy your evening. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda. So that concludes the application portion of the agenda. So the next item on the agenda for committee members is other business or new business. Is there any other business or new business to be raised? Okay, seeing none, then I'll look for a motion for adjournment for this evening's meeting. Mark? Seconder? Cecil? Thank you. And any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor for adjournment, raise your hand. Thank you. Motion's carried 3-0. Thank you. That concludes the meeting of this evening's Committee of Adjustments meeting. Thanks, everybody.